Please welcome today's guest, Dr. Casey Myers. Dr. Casey is an intuitive, thought provoking leader licensed as a mediator, life, and sex coach with over 7 disciplines, earned a bachelor's in applied management and psychology before being honored with a doctorate degree for her work and book introducing a new area of psychology, spiritual human behavior. Dr. Casey has been working as a life coach 10 plus years and author 16 with over several books and workbooks available for purchase. But her favorite purchase accomplishment is being a mom, a community leader, taking pride in growing and shifting the world into healing and wholeness. With love reaching over 650K views on Speaking Freedom TV with 12 seasons and counting. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, in our meet and greet, you mentioned about your mother attempting to take your life.
Yes.
How did you get to a place of forgiveness when your mother put you through that type of trauma?
I can't say that there was ever any real resentment because it was the type of behavior that I was used to. So it wasn't something that, especially at that time, that I like had a grudge about. It was just an experience in my life that happened. And so a lot of times other people struggle with thinking that I had a problem forgiving. Um, but I've never really been that type of a person. I have always been the person that I look at the situation and I kind of go from there. It's not about holding a grudge as much as it's not allowing you to continue to do those same patterns of behavior. So it wasn't really like a forgiveness thing. It was just like I got over it. Like it, I didn't have to live with her no more. I had moved out after the incident. They kicked me out. Then I ended up going to the army. So it was really if I'm being honest, it would be more of an avoidance type of a thing because I didn't have to deal with it. I mean, I lived with it, but it wasn't like I had to be in their face all the time. So it wasn't like I was bitter or anything like that. I just moved on with my life. And I think that's how I process. Like, I don't really sulk a lot on anything.
Mm-hmm.
I take it in, I try to learn whatever I'm going to get from it, and then I kind of move on beyond it.
Okay. Okay, so fast forward to you leaving your mom's home or your parents' home. Fast forward and you went to enlist in the military.
Yes.
Okay. What was that experience like for you?
Man, the military was a great experience. So prior to joining the army, prior to even my mother trying to kill me, I literally fought a lot. I probably just a lot of built up animosity of being always alone or always feeling picked on because I'm a smaller, petite type of person. I've always been very small. People would try to, poke at me, like, and so it made me kind of rar a little bit. So, so um joining the army was one of those things that I wanted to save my life. I went in with a plan. I wanted to do 20 years. I felt like at 17, if I joined the army at 17, my plan is by 37 I could be retired. I could be living this great life that most people don't get a chance to live until they're 50 or 60 years old. So it was a great experience. It taught me a lot of discipline, which I wanted. It taught me about being more responsible and it gave me a foundation that I didn't get from my parents because both of them worked at GM. And if you've ever known anybody that worked for General Motors, they have long hours and it's a schedule, but it can be sporadic on how much they work. So that was a priority. And like as an adult, I understand the priority to provide, but a lot of people forget the presence of being around provides something too.
Mhm.
So the Army just gave me everything that I didn't have when it came to discipline, structure, and learning about myself in a way that wasn't codependent on other people. The Army was life changing. It's one of the things that I actually suggest to people that may be lost or, don't know what they want to do, because it will help you, if not create the path that you want to your career goals and your lifestyle goals, it will give you the foundation to build on. Because I feel like the Army creates machines. We're all like machines, but
Okay.
they just give you structure on how to operate at a full function. It's just when you get out the Army, you have to recreate the machine to work for yourself instead of working for, the establishment.
Mhm.
But it was a great experience. It was the most life-changing things. I learned to shoot guns. I learned, like, to stand on my own in a way that I don't know if I would have ever learned in the street without having to face really craziness.
Now, did you tell me in our meet and greet that you actually like you actually was in a war? Did you say
Yes,
that you?
yes.
How about
I did.
that?
I went to Iraq in 2003, actually in September 2003. So the war in Iraq started in April of 2003. I literally had just had knee surgery. So I was like encamped in the um all of the initial attacks. Like I was watching, and it was every day. That's like what I focused on. So in the midst of having the surgery and healing from that and watching the war on TV, I ended up having a dream about being in Iraq. Like I literally had this dream, and in my dream, it was like bunk beds, and it was just like weird. But the feeling was so strong. I'm getting chills from even talking about it right now.
Wow.
The feeling was so strong when I had the dream that when they told us it was time for us to go, that we was gonna go to Iraq, I literally was like, look, I'm supposed to be back here because I just had surgery and I don't really have to go, but I want to go to Iraq. It was just something in me. I needed to go to Iraq. So we went, and it was so crazy because I kept saying, like, man, in my dream, like it was like my dream was confirmation once we got there, to the point to where I was like, man, in my dream, we had got into a shootout. And I was like, man, in my dream, I was shooting, and we ain't got to no shootout. And I promise this was like on the last day, I was like, we ain't been no shootout. And I had it like in my literally in my dream, we were shooting. And I was like, I can't believe that I had this dream like this and it didn't happen. And literally we had a vehicle breakdown probably within the next couple of hours, and the shootout happened. So literally we got into a shootout. Like we were stuck on, we convoyed from Kuwait to where we were at in Iraq. So it was like a 3 day convoy. On the very last day, um, we were stuck, got pulled over, one of the tires blew, and it was a white truck riding down the street. It just out of nowhere. And as soon as the truck was riding down the street, the people that were standing outside of their houses all started to like disappear. So I'm talking to my chief, like, where did everybody go? Like it was just people outside. Like this is really strange. And then the next thing you know, they started shooting at us. And we literally, like, I had to do a combat roll. I felt like I was Rambo. I did a combat roll to the right.
You was GI Jane. That's what you were.
Yes, yes, yeah. I mean, I literally, but that is for me, that was the mindset that I had to have to survive, but it wasn't one that I was unfamiliar with because I came from the streets. Like all of my families were, they used to do shootouts. Literally, I have a cousin that was in jail at one point for doing a shootout on the main road where I'm from. So it was like, for
That was
me,
in your blood.
yeah, it
In your
really truly
blood.
is.
Yeah.
My dad, I didn't know this when I signed up for the army, but the day that I left, I told my dad that I was leaving to go to the army, and I found out that he had served in the military too, and he was in the army. He actually fought in Vietnam, and then I had later I found out that my granddad was in the army. I had an uncle that was in the army, another one that was in the Marines. So it really was in my blood more than I would have ever known at the time. That was just it was it was a planned decision. After my mom tried to kill me, I literally was playing on the army phone for like 3 or 4 months. I want to say almost 6 months. I would call, I would hang up. I was scared. I was nervous. I was, 17,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself, but that was the best option that I had. Being it, like, I had known people that getting jumped, they getting killed on the street. I was just like, what am I going to do with myself? So at the time, that's when you remember they used to give out those VHS uh tapes of the Jesus story. I
Yes.
used to watch that all the time. And then I was calling, playing on a recruiter phone. They would pick up, I would hang up. And then one day I got the courage to actually talk to the guy. And it literally was a life-changing conversation. He helped me stop smoking. He helped me get my mind right. He helped me pass all the tests so that I could go into the military. So it was life before the military. I don't even know, what my life would have been without the army, because it literally changed my life. Going to Iraq was equivalent to what I would have faced if I would have stayed on the streets. So to me, it
Wow.
was like I would being in the same dilemma, but in a different environment can literally change or save your life. Even though I was in Iraq, it was, a life-saving thing for me. I actually got saved and filled with the Holy Spirit in Iraq.
Glory to God. Yes.
That was the epitome of my experience in Iraq. So when people talk about going and being in war, yes, it was scary. We got attacked in our sleep sometimes. Like, it was a stressful experience because you never knew when, something would happen. You always had to be on guard. And of course, that has long-term effects because now I handle stress a little bit differently than I probably would have if I would have never experienced that. But that experience allowed me to be filled with the Holy Spirit before I knew what the Holy Spirit was. Like,
Okay,
I
that
was
was
over there, like, I was saying, thank you, God, but thank you, God was not coming out of my mouth. I mean, and it really made me afraid to go to church when I first got back from Iraq for a long time because I could not control what God was doing through me whenever I would go into a church building. So yeah, Iraq was definitely nothing like I expected it to be, but
mhm.
my dream sent me there and I literally saw the things that I saw in my dream. They happened, like the bunk beds, everything actually became what I saw in person, and it tripped me out when I was there because I was like, "Y'all, like this is the dream that I had."
Wow.
So I have an extraordinary life that I didn't realize until like after the fact and understanding who I am as a person and
Mhm,
as a purpose.
mhm. Tell me about the PTSD.
So with PTSD, so of course, being in Iraq is the reason, my main source of PTSD. However, PTSD comes from any type of trauma or stressful experience. Having a child can give you PTSD. Being in an accident can give you PTSD. So for me, PTSD is a response that my body has, even if my mind is not there. And I say that because when I first got back from Iraq, this is when I knew I had PTSD. Before I knew it was PTSD, but I knew something was wrong. I got back from Iraq and they were still doing drills. So they were still the firing, the guns, and all of that. And I would just get the shakes. I'm talking about like my eyes would start watering, like tears would come, like I would be having an extreme emotional response while
Mhm,
telling myself like I'm safe. Like like chill out. Like what is going like, but I could not control the way my body was responding. For me, it still happens like that when I hear fireworks. If I am not like mentally prepared to hear fireworks,
mhm.
or if I'm started really easy, or it's a lot of different little things that trigger anxiety for me because PTSD is just anxiety at an extreme level.
Well, Dr. Casey, I'm surprised that you didn't get that when your mom was trying to, take your life. I'm surprised that you didn't get that, or was it, you know what I mean? Was it triggered by the actual trauma later on, or was it triggered, at the beginning?
So I think that that plays a part in my overall trauma, but you got to remember I was 17 when that happened.
Yes,
So
yes.
that is not something that really stuck with me as much, um or the effects of it I couldn't tell now. After the
Mhm.
fact, like, you know, a lot of women talk about liking to be choked when they have sex. I don't want to ever be choked. Like, that is not my thing. I have
Right.
that is it's a trauma for me. So
Mhm.
that's not arousing for me. But I see women talk about it all the time, and I'm like, no, 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 please
No,
don't
no.
touch me again. Like, so the trauma behind like that is there, and maybe I think when I feel threatened, my response is a little bit more of violence, but I think that that probably is an extension of that type of trauma from my mother. But other than that, I've never had any type of traumatic responses. Probably the way I handle relationship with other females may be a little bit difficult or different because I have that type of trauma with my mother, the person that's supposed to teach me how
Mhm.
to relate and deal with other women was not a good was not good at that because me and her couldn't, mesh well.
Right. What kind of advice would you give someone who is struggling with PTSD?
The first thing that I would tell a person struggling with PTSD is to learn your triggers. And that's hard to do unless you know that you're trying to figure out what makes me tick or what makes me click. Because sometimes the things that we're doing, we may not realize that it's having a triggering effect and it's making you respond a certain way. Not all triggers are a dysfunctional thing. Like, sometimes you may be triggered to do something. It's almost like a person with OCD and real extreme cleaning habits. That's PTSD from maybe having rats or roaches or just house always being a mess. So they respond anytime they feel a mess, it gives them anxiety.
Mhm.
Same PTSD, different type of trauma, different type of response. So it's really just learning your responses, learning the trauma, then figuring out the responses and trying to map it to where that trauma began. So, like with spiritual human behavior, it actually is geared to help you understand your trauma and your triggers because it takes you back to a space to, why do I act like this? Where did this come from? Like, when did I start responding to things a certain way? And normally you will be able to go back to a point in your time childhood or a time in your life where you're like, you know what, this was that thing that happened to where
Mhm.
I started responding different. So now every time I feel like this is that situation again, my responses are to avoid the hurt that came with that. And it's really, that's what PTSD really is a response of an anxiety from a hurt that you've experienced and not wanting to relive that trauma again. The goal has to be to relearn how we respond. So instead of being triggered with violence, you might be like, okay, I
Mhm.
feel this is triggering me. So now I need to respond differently.
Mhm. And that was going to be my next question, the new area of psychology, spiritual human behavior, and how does it play into purpose?
So it actually, so as you begin to understand your childhood, how your environment, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, how everything shaped you as a person,
Mhm.
you will be able to understand who you are and why you are who you are, which helps you understand and align better with your purpose. So if you um start to understand that when you do certain things, people used to tell you, well, don't think like that. Or if I had dreams as a child and I told somebody that I had a vivid dream, they might tell me, well, you didn't see that, or like, especially older generations of that, you know, what goes on in this house, stay in this house and keeping little secrets. And it compartmentalized a lot of us in how we accepted ourselves and the
Mhm.
things that we felt comfortable with being ourselves and talking about to others. So, what spiritual human behavior does is it helps you to heal those areas and accept yourself because There are some things about you that somebody told you that was bad,
Mhm.
but God gave you your attitude. You don't supposed to have your attitude with everybody all the time, but there are appropriate times for you to have an attitude and maybe, elevate how you handling something so that you can get what it is accomplished that you've been sent to accomplish. So it's really just learning how to manage the negative aspects of you. Because, like, for myself, um, when I created spiritual human behavior, I was healing from divorce, separation, and still trying to process that trauma and drama. So within healing that, I started learning patterns about myself. I started
Mhm.
seeing, how things related. Then I started asking myself when it came to relationships, okay, why do you like the type of guys that you like? Well, then I started looking at, well, my uncle, who were the men around me that influence how I see men?
Mhm.
Because that's going to tell you who you are willing to entertain or accept. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, I'm a very compassionate person. So if I see people that struggle with things that men in my life struggle with, I try to be like, you've been in jail before. Well, I got people that's been in jail. So I'll give you a chance because I want somebody to give them a chance,
Right,
And
right.
my life has always been kind of a karmatic thing where I'm trying to put in the good seeds for somebody else to reap the benefits.
Mhm.
So that has been the biggest blessing in helping me find my purpose because now I know that that's a part of who I am. Me giving people advice is not just me being a jerk or trying to be a know it all. It's a part of who I am. But if you're around the wrong people, then they'll tell you, no, you can't, you shouldn't know that much, or you shouldn't tell people that you know that much. When the truth is there are people that you're called to know that much for. There's people that will need what it is that God has put inside of you, but if you are doubting yourself because of negative self talk based on other people and what people have said to you, then you will eventually begin to dim your own light based
Mhm.
on what those people have said. So, spiritual human behavior is helping you find your light again.
Well, you think about there's life and death in the tongue.
Mm-hmm,
You know what I mean? So people don't realize the words you say that you speak over yourself, the words you speak, how you speak over others,
mm-hmm,
it could be death or it could be life. I mean, it could be life. You know what I mean? And we have to be so careful. Like even the small things, we don't think that it's affecting us.
mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty. I'm
Yeah,
very guilty of that.
I try to. I mean, based on your environment, it's kind of, you're going, it's some things that you might repeat
Mhm.
just on, because, it's the
A
thing that
learned
you,
behavior.
uh-huh.
You've been saying that for ages. You know.
It's to the point to where I don't even like listening to Mary J. Blige songs no more. You know why? Because all of Mary J. Blige is Sad Mary. I don't want to be Sad Mary. So I'm not repeating. We're
Right.
not going down. I'm going up. Every time the
Right.
song
Right.
come on, no, we got to change these
Right.
words because you experience what you put out there. It's also even like when I think about zodiac signs, a lot of people look at zodiac signs. If you're religious, you're probably like, but they're not supposed to be. Just hear me out, okay? Because zodiac signs do give you characteristics of people's likeness. And for me, I use the bad ones so that if they say all Sagittarius, people born around the same time, have these same characteristics, then the bad qualities are those should be used to develop you. Because now, okay, if it's saying that I struggle, people born in the same time frame as me struggle with these type of things, and these are the things that I need to work on so I'm not struggling with those things. And
Mhm.
so it's really just reshaping and reframing how we see things in general. Because there are, if but as you begin to work on yourself, as you begin to see the light in yourself instead of saying all the things that you don't like,
Mhm.
then you will be able to do that with the world. So as you fix and heal yourself, as you start addressing those issues, you start looking at other people and other situations. Well, like, well, I know if I'm like this, then they might be going through this, or they might have had, and then you start considering other people's experience, and it makes you be a very much more compassionate person with others. So when you hear love your neighbor as yourself, of
Mhm.
course you don't like the person next to you because you don't it's things about yourself that you poke at, that you tell yourself you're not good enough about, or if I could just change this, versus accepting that. But then when you start accepting that, then you start looking at other people like, you know what? They just don't love themselves anymore. But as you love yourself, you can love others better. So when we see negative people, it's because of a negative self-image that they have for themselves, and
Yeah.
then they end up projecting it.
And you have to guard your ear gate. You got to
You really
protect
do.
your heart too, because it can happen so it's so subtle. You know what
Most
I mean? And then you be like, all of a sudden, now it's a seed. So
and
it
depending
takes
on what
work.
it is, yeah, it really does. The thing is that as you begin to really tap into your purpose, it's going to take you away from the people that are not there yet,
Mhm.
and you end up losing people. And it's it feels bad, but at the end it's not bad, because as you begin to grow, you outgrow people that's not willing to grow with you. Now there'll be some people that's like, you know what, they might not get it, but they'll catch on and they'll grow at some point, and y'all will reconnect. But the growth part is the scariest part, and that's why a lot of people perpetuate the cycles that they've been in, because when you start growing, now you don't relate to the people that still want to be in that area, in that headspace. So it really changes your life a lot when you begin to look inside of yourself and really
Mhm.
work on yourself, because now you don't tolerate that, because I've learned, I've healed from that. So why would I put up with it? And it really it changes your mindset, your life, your outlook, and it changes the way you operate, because now instead of doing things for money, you're doing things for purpose. And
Mhm.
because you're doing things for purpose, it's some money that you will turn down. It could be $1 million, but if it's not connected to the right thing, when you're purposeful, then you will know that that $1 million, it might look like a good million, but it can lead you down the wrong path
Do I
on
have
the
to give
long.
my soul for it? Do I have to
Yeah,
give
that
my
that's
soul
the
in
part.
exchange for that billion?
And what it is that when people talk about selling their souls, it's selling out their purpose. You're no longer purposeful. Now you're just doing stuff led by what the accomplishment will bring you versus what it's going to do for your soul. So a lot of people, that's how you get a whole lot of money and be empty on the inside. You still be, ready to take your life because you're not being fulfilled. You just got a whole lot of stuff that's filling up the room. You're
Right.
filling your bank account, but you're not filling your heart. And if you
Mhm.
don't feel your heart, then no matter how much you got in your bank account, all of that becomes is a distraction.
Mhm.
And people use a lot of band-aids. It's a actual theory in my book called the band-aid effect. And it's really about the way people, put stuff on top of hurt to cover the hurt, and you cover in the hurt. But if you leave a band-aid on too long, it actually get infected. It's not gonna get better. It gets worse if you don't let it get some air and breathe so that it can actually heal. And that's the same way with people, whether it's manipulation, whether it's, shopping, it could be work. Sometimes church can be a band-aid because you go in there to forget versus actually dealing and healing. So you got to deal with your issues in order to heal your issues. You can't just slap a band-aid on it and say, you know what, it's gonna be better. You put too much Neosporin on, Neosporin is gonna make your cut worse.
Mhm. Yeah, you have to do the work internally and externally. You know what I mean? You can't expect the pastors to do everything. It's something that it's self-assessment of what you need to kind of like look at yourself and say, you know what, that area I could work on.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really the type of life you want me to be. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? I mean, have or be involved in.
Yeah, the biggest thing with purpose is figuring out what is good for you, because everybody has a different purpose. Nobody on this earth would serve the same purpose that Jesus served. He had a specific purpose. Paul had a specific purpose. Matthew, they all had. So it's finding what's your purpose and then flowing within that, because there are some things that may be a part of your purpose that somebody else isn't graced to do. So
Mhm.
somebody else might not be able to do what you're supposed to do because
Mhm.
it's not their purpose. So we also have to make sure that we don't get distracted by what people think we should do versus what because none of the people in the Bible thought that Jesus was supposed to be healing on that dang on Sabbath, but he was healing. You know what I mean?
Right,
But
right,
if he would
right.
have listened to the people, he would not have been as powerful because he was doing things when people
What
said,
his
"Oh
father
no, you
said.
can't."
He did what his
Yeah,
father said. I'm about my father's business.
and,
Okay.
and that, I think a lot of us struggle with seeking approval so much to where we don't carry out what God is telling us because we're waiting for somebody else to say, yeah, God did tell you that. No, you can't. The Bible might not even give you confirmation because,
Some
the
things
thing,
are only confirmed through the Holy Spirit.
the living word is what God is telling you every single day. And that's the importance of praying and tapping in with God and making sure that we always have that open communication and not the churchy communication. We got to have real conversations with God because God knows us, regardless if we could lie to God if we want to, you can tell
Right,
you can say all of these and thous and does that you want,
right,
but
right.
you really have to go to God open hearted, like lay it all out there because he gonna see it anyway. Like God is God. God know you got it. So if you lay it all out there, then God can tell you how to pick it up and put it in the place that it needs to be versus just being wherever it lays.
I think we make the mistake too. Stop trying to compare yourself with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And if God wanted everybody to be the same, He would have made everybody the same. You got to realize
Robots.
what's your authentic, you know what I mean, gift. That's your gift. He gave you that. You know what I mean? And people will make you feel bad because your gift is not like somebody else's gift.
See, and then the other part is, growing up, I think I've always had dreams and different little, spidey senses, if you would call it. Um, but I always thought that if I was like this, then everybody must have this insider. And you have to realize that you are an individual. Nobody is you. There are certain things, even some of the bad things that you went through, were purposeful to teach you about why God sent you here. So we have to be able to look at life with the lens of learning versus of why me or the woe is me. I don't I said this earlier, I don't really soak a lot because I'm always trying to figure out, okay, well, God, well, what do you want me to do with this? Because I learned when my mom tried to kill me that if God allowed me to go through that and survive that, it got to be for somebody else. There's no way that
Right,
God let me
exactly. They said
have
what you
my
go through
mama.
is not for you, it's for somebody else.
It has to. So I think that helped me with forgiveness, I guess, because my mindset was if God let me go through something, then he got to be letting me go through it to help somebody else because there's no way
Right. I
like
mean, and
like for real, like God, this is what we
right,
doing. Okay.
right. No,
All right.
we say God won't put more on you than you can bear. But really, when you're in it, you're like, you think I can bear this? Because this is a lot. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he knows. He said it. He made you. He knows what you can bear. You're not thinking like that.
See, but that goes back to really evaluating the things that we've gone through so we can really know who we are. Like all
Mhm.
of those things teach us who we are.
Yes.
My belief is that when the Bible talks about God knowing us before we are in our mother's womb and our stories are already written, I
Mhm.
believe that when we are in transition into being born, we are told, we are shown and told everything that we were supposed to experience.
Mhm.
And it is our job when we get to earth and are born as babes, we are very open to the spiritual world. We are very open until we are probably about 5 or 6 and they start diminishing who like the
Mhm.
world shows us different than what we
The
know.
world tells us who we are.
Yeah, yeah. So,
It's
but
genetic.
as we grow older, the goal is to remember what God showed us
It's
that we're
original
supposed
design
to
and
accomplish.
purpose for our
Yes,
life. Yes,
yes,
yes.
yes. Because everything, if it's already written, then that means the dreams that I'm having, they're dreams, but that's God reminding me in my sleep time what we had already talked about before I came to earth. Because God is going to show you everything. God will show you more than people want you to believe that God will show you. And then it's your job to follow through making the decisions that will take you to what God showed you. Because God will show you something, but then you're going to be faced with a decision.
And I
Do I
think it's also important not to look at your now to make a decision like this is the end all be all. Because he
And
says,
that's the
lean not
thing.
to your own understanding, acknowledge me.
Yeah,
Okay.
but when
Yeah.
we make the decisions too quickly, we
Yes.
might not be thinking, okay, how does this put? But if we don't know our purpose, we don't even know to make a decision based on the long end, because we don't know our purpose. But when you begin to understand more about your purpose,
Mm-hmm.
even your decisions will take you closer to your purpose.
Yes.
Everything will begin to lead you down that path. But if you don't know your purpose and you make quick decisions, then you might decide something that
Mm-hmm.
takes you away. It might not take you away forever. It might not be a long time, but it will delay your path. The
Will
thing
delay it.
is,
Mm-hmm.
we are purposeful. No matter what we do, we can't stop the plan of God until we get way so far out to it opens us up to something happen to us or
Mm-hmm.
something bad. But if as long as you stay on that path,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be okay. And I believe that even in death, I think people are warned. The same way you get a bad feeling about not going somewhere or being on time or something, I think that there is a feeling that people get when they're going to put themselves in harm's way. But we've gotten so accustomed to ignoring when God is
Exactly.
speaking to us that we don't even recognize, okay, God might be telling you to slow down. It's not always fear. It's not always, the
It's not
thing.
always the devil.
It's not always the devil. Sometimes God needs you to slow down. And
Mhm.
we blame the devil for so much that we
So
won't even
much.
allow God to be God or allow God to use us to
Hmm.
be vessels because we always think the devil is behind something. And
Exactly.
sometimes
We are
those hard
suspect all the time.
Mhm. But those hard decisions can take us to the good places. And a
Yes,
lot of
yes.
people don't understand that because I'm sure if I would have been thinking back, if I would have been religious back then, I would have known that the Iraq was the devil. That was the devil.
Right,
Ain't no, but I
right.
experienced God over there. And the crazy thing now is when I look up where I was in Iraq, it is supposedly based on the research not far from where the Garden of Eden was supposed to have been when it existed. So the experience that I had was not just some random experience. It was almost in my mind as I'm thinking about it now, like God was calling me to that
Mhm.
area for whatever he wanted to open me up to. I needed to be there in order to experience. And that experience literally changed my life.
It was almost like you were in a wilderness experience, and that's where you met God. And sometimes we're not always meeting God on the mountaintop. We're meeting him in the pit,
In the thick of it.
in the thick of it, in the pit. You know what I mean? And in the bad places, in the hard places. That's what sometimes you
But
meet
people
God.
don't want to go to the bad places and the hard places. And the other part, what I just felt is that sometimes that pit, that hard place, is that place inside of you that you don't want to visit. That hurt, that somebody did something, or
Exactly.
just yeah. And it's not always like a unforgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
but it is examining yourself. You got to study yourself in order to really be used of God because you got to know one, it teaches you the tricks of the enemy. What can the enemy do, or what will the enemy try to attack in order to
Mm-hmm.
hold me back? But then it also opens you up to be used by God in
Mm-hmm.
a better way.
Yes,
About to run out of time.
absolutely. Um, what type of legacy would you like to leave behind?
I want to extend the legacy of my grandmother. And my grandmother's legacy was she was the angelic force where I'm from. And I believe that that's what I'm doing now is just extending her legacy of being a vessel of God, really.
Okay. If someone wants to receive any of your services, can you just kind of provide your social media platforms?
It is Speaking Freedom on all platforms and Speaking Freedom TV.org or speakingfreedom.org.
Okay. And finally, since we're closing, can you give some last words of encouragement to the viewers that are watching?
Work on yourself. Really examine yourself. Start going through everything that you're afraid to sit with about you so that you can have peace. Peace is the best tool that you'll ever have.